So day 7 is all about starting to give your gargoyle all the features that it needs to turn it into a gargoyle. So we're going to be doing all the facial features. So today's the day really where you've got so much choice. Now I'm going to cover as much as possible so you can see any different techniques, but I will focus more than anything on these new ones for anyone that is going to put the new pieces together. So your choices are, let's start really with the eyes. So when it comes to the eyes, the newest ones, you're actually creating 2 balls, and then you're creating 2 eyelids that you sew on top to create those eyes. With the original Phillipe, what you've got is a small disc or a circle like that you then sew the eye onto, and then you've almost got a brow, like a grumpy looking furrowed brow that sits over the top that comes down to the front. Then if you've got the PDF and you've got the other 2 as well, on this one you've got a much larger, more bulbous eye, so I guess more insect-like really. So you're making a much bigger piece of crochet there. And then with the last one you've just got a small disc, and here you're actually crocheting a brow on top. So not as big and prominent as Phillipe's, you actually crochet that in at the end. So they're your 4 different choices. Now let's just talk about safety eyes for a second. So basically, if you are using safety eyes, what you need to do is, if you haven't put them in already, the great thing is you can put them in now. So with all of the eyes that we're discussing, you actually sew them all on afterwards, and so that means that what you can do at this stage is actually crochet your pieces and then push your eyes through. Now, to safety eye or not safety eye is obviously entirely personal preference. I don't usually safety eye at all. It's not a design that I would use safety eyes on. But that said, if you really want to go for something that looks more evil, you could even go for a cat eye, or we do red ones. So get creative really at this stage if you are somebody who likes to add those safety eyes in. So what I'm going to do is just show you. So Phillipe's, which is this one here, so the original ones, what you're doing there is you're creating a disc like that, and you would be sewing that in place. So I would recommend sewing both circle pieces in first, and then what you'll be doing is sewing an eyebrow in across the top like that to create a lovely shape. And what I'm actually going to do with mine is sew that in place for you so you can see it. And then I'm going to take it off because I'm actually going to finish with the new eyes, I think, on this one. I'm going to do a bit of a mix and match across both. So here is the eye circle. Put your yarn through the last one like that just to turn it into a complete circle, and then line that up and in. And to get the neatest finish, again, if you are doing a safety eye, attach your safety eye onto that disc and then push that in before you do this. But if you're going to just sew on with black lengths of thread, then you don't need to do that until the very end when it's all sewn up. Then what I would do is I would back stitch like that around the edge, so that's safely in position, really firmly attached. Like that. And then when it comes, now I'm not going to do that very securely because I'm actually going to take this back off because I'm not going to have these ones on mine, but I wanted to show you both tips for sewing them on. If you're doing the Phillipe one that has this really prominent brow, gather the stitches at the end like that. And then what you don't want to put any stuffing in it, what you want to do is almost curve it around the eye that you've put in place. Do you see, like that? That's going to give him that really grumpy attitude that I think is absolutely characteristic of Phillipe and gargoyles in general. So hold it at the tip like that. My tip would be really to tack it in place at either end first, so you don't feel like you're having to hold it. So tack it in place at either end, make sure you're happy with that curve, and then you would just sew along this side here, so the side closest to the head above the eye, you just over sew all the way along that in order to tack that in place. Then you're going to do the same on the other side, leaving a gap for the nose through the middle. So that's how you would sew on Phillipe's, but I'm actually going to go for the newest ones, the slightly more googly finish on the eye. So I'm just going to take off what I had there. I mean, this is probably a good thing for anyone to see, because I know that this stage of sewing up is often the one that makes people most nervous. So know that if you're not happy with the way it looks when you've sewn it up, you can always just snip it off and go again if you change your mind and you're not happy with your positioning once you've put them in place. So that's off. Let's go for these different eyes. So with these, what you're going to have made is an eyeball. So you've got a little 3D sphere. You need to push a little bit of stuffing in there like that. There we go, like that. So when it comes to creating your eyelid to sit on top of your eyeball, what you're going to do is do your standard increase. So you've got a circle like that, and then fold it in half with your right side facing outwards. And then all you need to do is double crochet through both sides of it. So come in through this side and out through that side, and crochet right the way around the edge then of that semicircle to close it up, and then we'll sew that in place to become an eyelid. Like that. Leave yourself a nice long end on. That's really a good tip for all of these pieces as we are doing the head, because they're all going to involve sewing them into place. Right, so I've got one eyeball stuffed. I'm going to stuff the second one. Right, so I've got my two eyeballs made, I've got my two eyelids made. I'm actually now going to make the nose to show you that technique as well, because we're putting bobbles, so the MBs, the same techniques that we use for the knuckles, I've actually echoed in this new nose, so that you can make a nice kind of wide nostriled nose for your gargoyle. So to create the nose, and this pattern is free in the extra PDF download that you can get for all these extra eyes and ears and horns. So do your 6 in a ring, up to 12 stitches, so now we're going to do, we're going to create one of the sides of the nose by doing an MB7. So to do an MB7, yarn round your hook in the stitch, and 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and then back in, and on the 7th one come through all of the loops in one go like that. Then slip 5, and slipping straight after it will make it nice and tight. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. That will form the bottom of your nose, and then do another MB7. And after you do that last MB7, just slip after it. That'll just give you a neater finish on your nose like that. So those two bobbles form the side of your nose, and your slip stitches are your bottom of your nose like that. Now I'd put a little bit of stuffing in. Just a little bit of stuffing into the end. And let's start to put this face together. So I'm leaving the mouth until last tomorrow. I still haven't quite made my mind up which mouth I'm going to go for yet on mine. But obviously that's going to be a nice thing at this stage, that if you know that you've got plans for Halloween, you will be able to get that feature on today as well. So when it comes to putting your nose in position, what you want to do, line up your gargoyle with its body like this, bring your nose up and into position on the front of the head there. And what I will sometimes do, if I'm still debating pieces like you might be, is I might just tack that into place first and leave it there while I consider a few options. So I've already decided that I'm going for this new style of eyes, the more googly eyes that stick off the surface. So they're going to go in here in a second. Then I've gone for the bigger ears, which I've got here. And the positioning of your ears will really influence the personality of your gargoyle. So I'll talk about that a little bit later. And with the two that you've actually got a few different sizes and shapes of horn. So here in the original Phillipe, you've got a much smaller, more delicate horn. These long ones are slip stitched around the outside, which I'll show you now as a technique as well. So to create the lovely slip stitch horns, all you need to do is when you finish crocheting the horn, and obviously you could sew it on as it is, you don't need this detail at all, but to show the difference between the two, is that's the horn as it's crocheted. And when you slip stitch in between the rounds, do you see how much it elongates it? It really stretches out those stitches, and it also puts that lovely texture in on it. This would work really well in contrast too. So if you are somebody who's using 2 different shades of grey or 2 different shades of brown with your design, this would work really well if you put those slip stitches in contrast. But if you just want to go straight on rather than using a different colour, all you need to do is when you finish crocheting is you just jump back up and you almost change direction, and all you're going to be doing, and it takes a while but it's worth it, is you slip stitch in between those stitches, and it forces the rounds apart so they elongate out and it gives it that lovely texture. So slip right the way up to the end. Like that. Right, let's actually sew the pieces in place because all my pieces are now complete. So here is my nose going in. And what I'll do with my nose is I will over sew underneath between the head and the nostrils like that. Right, now for the eyes. So with your eyes, gather the stitches on the back of the eyeball. And when it comes to sewing it in place, so because if you're going in for your safety eye and you've put it bang smack in the middle, it probably would make sense for you to have your starting circle front on like that. But actually what I find gives me a nicer finish is rather than positioning that flat on and then drawing a straight line through it, is I'm actually going to put mine in sideways like that before I then put my eyelid in place. So I'm going to sew it in position like this. make sure that's nicely firmly attached, but you will be putting more stitches through it really when you're putting this eyelid in place. So let's get rid of that end. Then when it comes to the eyelids, so you have got a top and a bottom because of you double crocheting around the outside. What I always find will give you a neater finish is to be consistent with the two. So just make sure you've got your V's to the top so that you're, you can see all those V's on the outside like that. And then sew this in and around that eyeball. So sew right down on one side. As always, you can keep it, you can, I guess, create the personality that you want to, because if you keep it a bit more open, it would act more like an eyebrow, more like Philippe's, but you can tuck it really close to that eyeball if you want to act more like a kind of deep hood. So that's what I'm going to do, is I'm going to come across and bring mine in very close to the eyeball there, like that. But this is the bit that will really give your gargoyle character. So play around with it. There isn't really a wrong or a right in terms of getting these eyes in and getting this personality in. Once you've got one in, so long as you're matching it with its second eye, then it can be as positioned uniquely as you want it to be, really. So there's that like that. All I'm going to do is I'm just going to make sure that thread's not visible on this side. Just to neaten that up like that. Also, it's a very prominent eye on this one, like that. So I'm now going to try and do the same thing on the other side. And this is the thing where there is a bit more art than science, obviously. Everything else we've done with the whole of our gargoyle and crocheting is mathematical. This bit, getting the kind of character and the personality in your gargoyle, try and enjoy and know that no matter what you do, yours will be unique to you, because they will all be slightly different. So to match it up, what I'll tend to do is try and always refer to my first one. So come back along like that and try and do exactly the same thing we did the first time. So I'm going to put the eyeball in first. Leaving yourself a nice long end of yarn will make your life easier. So second lid. But I'm going to keep the V's upwards again. So that way round. Position it in. And then try and get it as mirrored as that side as possible. So I'll be coming back into my nose. I see that I'm just to one side of my nose. There is where my eyelid starts. And then I'm going to curve it right round. Pay attention to where you've come to on the round. So do you see here, what I'll often do is I can see that that is attached there. So track that round, and you know that you've got to come a little bit higher to that one for that to be balanced with the other one. Tuck it right in. There we go. And I'm just going to try and balance those up a little bit like that with a couple more stitches on that side. Right, eyeballs in place. Now I'm going to put the black lines in just to make it easy before we carry on. So if you are sewing the black eye threads in place, all I'm going to do is bring mine in and through like that, and then come downwards. down in and straight across to the other side. There we go, like that. Right, eyes in place. I'm going to leave the mouth till tomorrow because I'm going to ponder that one a little bit longer. So let's do the horns. So you've seen the technique for how to make the horns. I've obviously slip stitched these ones as per the second one. You have got lots of different types of horns. If you have got the PDF, this gargoyle has much wider, shorter horns, which would also look great if you did slip stitch around the outside them as well, if you wanted to combine the two different techniques. Now, when it comes to positioning horns, generally speaking, you want them to be quite close to the top of the head, like this. But it's going to change the look dramatically on where you put them. So do you want them to curve inwards? Do you want them to curve forwards? Do you want them to curve backwards? And that really is entirely personal choice. Now, if you're curving them backwards, they do look very good if you pop them close together like this. Do you see how this would look very, very different if these two horns were sewn here quite close together? Just to give you an idea. You can play forever at this stage. If you're somebody who sometimes has been fearful of sewing up because you don't want to get it wrong, the great thing about doing a gargoyle is you really can't get this wrong. It doesn't matter where you put them. It's just going to give you a very different character. So there is no wrong or right. Have a play with where you want to put them. Now, I think this time round, I might actually go quite close together on the front. They're almost ram-like. Then I've gone for the bigger ears. Now, if you put them in a downwards facing position, it can be very cute. In fact, quite similar to a character that some of us might be familiar with there, if you go down here. But you can obviously position them more likely to look quite evil, dog-like, almost, dog or cat-like if you put them on top of the head, so more animalistic. Obviously, you can come on the sides as a happy medium in the middle. There really is no wrong or right. Right, I'm just going to plump for it. In the end, you might just decide, oh, I've just got to go for this. You know what I might do? I might put my ears on first. I might put my ears on first and then go for my horns on last. So with your ears, to create a nice shape, rather than just sewing them flat, what I would say is close them off like that. And if you do it like that, you'll get a nice shape when you do so. It'll just drag them in to create a nice curve, and then I'm going to go for quite a downwards facing position like this. So sew them along one side first. And then to make sure they're really firmly attached, flip them over and do the same on the other side. Then when you're doing the second one, do the same thing and then use the rounds, like I said, with the eyes, use the rounds to give you a bit of a guide to get them level with the other ones. So if you're doing the second ear, what I would recommend is turning the head around and tracking across. So do you see that's attached to that round there, tracking across to that round there. So you know you've got them level. Put a stitch in and just check that you're tracking to the same one on the top as well, which I am. So across. So ears firmly attached. Right, now I've got to commit to these horns. Now I can see his face properly. I'm going to commit to these horns. So are we going, I think I'm going to go quite high and close together on this one like that. So it'll give it a very different personality to the other one, but you could come far apart. That's quite wide, probably You want to go for a happy medium in the middle, but I'm going to go quite close to the top. So when you finish this slip stitch technique, you will end up with your end at the tip like that. Just go and come back down again. There we go, so you can sew it with the same thread. Now, you could stuff the horns or not stuff the horns. Again, depends on what you want. If you want a flatter finish, don't stuff them. You could put just a little bit of stuffing in at the bottom. Tiny little bit will mean that they'll just stand up a little bit more. These ones actually aren't stuffed because the slip stitching, it's so rigid that it tends to support them enough that they won't need stuffing in. But I'm just going to pop a little bit in the end of that one. And then let's go for it. I'm going to go for here. Once you've got one in, it'll be much easier because you just got to match it for the second one. And I've chosen to curve them inwards this time. Look where the curve is before you put it into place. Put just a little bit of stuffing in the end to match the other one. I'm just going to match off on the other side. So again, look at where that is, track that around, make sure I'm curving inwards to match the other one. I'm at about the right position. Now, I don't use pins, but I think this is just because of the quantity of sewing up that I've done and the fact that I don't worry about the fact that if I do go wrong, which I obviously sometimes absolutely do go wrong and get it in the wrong place, I'll just cut it off and put it back on again. But if you're feeling less confident about sewing all these pieces in place, you obviously could use blocking pins first if you wanted to, just to attach them on until you're happy with the position. Hold them in place while you sew them on. Leave yourself nice long ends. I can't emphasize that more because you see there, mine's quite short, which is probably making my life a little bit harder than it needs to be when it comes to sewing them on. Right, that's it. Right the way around the edge and they're in position. Right, horns in position, ears in position, nose and eyes in position. Let me cut some ends off so you can really see this character come to life because we are very, very nearly there. And I've got a feeling that some of you this evening, if you get into this, might want to push forwards to the end anyway. But I'm going to cover the mouth techniques in a video tomorrow. And then tomorrow's video will be quite a long one because I'm then going to go and beyond. So this is where your 100-gram ball of yarn, if you did go for a kit, is probably going to come to its end in terms of the and beyonds once you've got these bits in place. But it's all about what you then want to add on to this to take it even further. So in tomorrow's video, I'm going to cover tails because I have already decided here that I'm going to be adding this tail onto mine. I'm then going to be covering claws because I'm going to go for a mushroom contrast colour, as you can start to see here with my stones. So I'm going to be putting features like claws onto mine and then wings. So this is whether you want your gargoyle to be winged or not, entirely your choice. You obviously could stop here if you wanted to. So tomorrow's video will be a long one, but the mix and match theme continues. It really is now deciding how far you want to go or whether you're just going to go for it and add all the different features on. Please share your pictures from today. I really would like to see your gargoyles start to come together as we get really close to Halloween. Show me, how did you find that? How did you find the positioning of the horns, of the sewing on of the parts? Do you love it or do you hate it? Or is it all worth it when you actually see it come together at the end?